AI is merely a tool, right? And sort of think about it like a knife, right? You can use a knife to sort of do a surgery which can save a human life, or you can use the same knife to kill someone, right?
Each voice will therefore matter in shaping the debates and discussions around AI, and everyone will truly feel empowered. And this is what our podcast also aims for.
We'll start with this analogy of going back to ancient Greece. Why ancient Greece? Because I have been a Pol Science student all of my life, and I understand that there was the father of philosophy living in ancient Greece, in Athens. Of course, his name is very familiar to us. It's Socrates. He is known for asking mind-boggling questions which made people arrive at answers. Let's start this conversation by going to ancient Greece. So this is a time of, let's say, 400 BC. I'm just going to narrate a story to you here. And there's a famous marketplace in ancient Greece called Agora. There's a man who's super excited and is roaming around flaunting his knowledge. He claims to have found perfect knowledge, perfect wisdom. Why? Because he has developed a tool. He says that he knows what sort of tools and goods people will want to buy, because that tool is able to analyze the past trends and also predict the future. But what happens? Socrates will come in the same. And Socrates, as we all know, is famously known for his dialectical approach of, asking questions and helping people arrive at answers by themselves. And he asked, smiling to that person, that, okay, even if you have discovered this new tool, and even if you claim to say that it knows what people will want, is it necessarily good for those people? And I'll emphasize on that question again.
That's a good one. The morality and knowledge are two different things. And morality and also the goodness of something is different from the knowledge.
Absolutely. Yes. It's at that point that the person gets confused, right? And the person says that if people have made a choice of choosing one thing constantly in the past, then of course they know what is good for them. But then Socrates says that if something has been happening for a very long time, can you always say that it's good for the people? And does good stay constant in evolving societies? That's the tricky question that Socrates puts forward. And if we fast forward it to today, then how do you see that analogy in terms of AI? Just curious about your view.
It's a very good story that you narrated, Bhumika. I think it also makes me reflect and think about it, that we tend to know some things and we are caught up in this local maxima, right? And there's a very good concept in physics as well, and also in mathematics. Just because you are in local maxima doesn't mean you're in global maxima. You might be good or happy with where you are, but there can be a larger happiness or larger goodness somewhere else. Think about the technological developments today, right? I mean, so the whole world is talking about AI and also talking about, what's really happening there and how AI is able to sort of generate new content and sort of help everyone do what they're doing. But one thing you have to remember is that all this is based on our own past behavior and our own past data, right? So what it is actually doing is it is generating by predicting, like what is the next word or what is the next way of doing it, right? Now, by the very definition of it based on our past data, predicting based on that and understanding pattern, it perpetuates existing problems and bias and also goodness, right? Whatever actually is existing, it accentuates that, right?
Yes.
And there's a very good study I saw that good humans, when they have access to AI tools, the outcome is much better.
Absolutely.
But if someone do bad things and they get access to AI tools, they can produce worse things, right?
Right.
So it shows like how well it perpetuates, right? So the question is about, so someone has to then take a judgment saying what is good versus bad, because AI simply perpetuate whatever you have been doing. So good becomes even better and bad becomes worse, right? So that's another thing I can think about, that just being anchored in today and knowing what you know today is sort of not something that we should all rest and be happy about, but we should strive for a better outcome.
Which is what brings us to this meaningful conversation about engaging in argument as well as inquiry of artificial intelligence, which is what I propose to be AI for AI, which is arguments and inquiry for artificial intelligence.
For AI. Like it. I like it. AI square, right?
Exactly. That's AI square if you look at it in mathematical sense of the thing, but it's also having its own very significant literal and metaphorical meaning. That is
Yeah.
arguments and inquiry on artificial intelligence. People might think that all of us are like all in for artificial intelligence, but this is in contrast to that. We are all in for the discussions on various issues around this emerging technologies, how it is intersecting with various sectors, and how it's actually affecting all of the various stakeholders of the society, including people like you and people like me, which represent so wide varieties of backgrounds. So this is where we start our conversation on AI Square.
I think lovely. I think I find it also very relevant in the current time is that because people are getting carried away by what they see, and there's a bit of a herd mentality happening in terms of, okay, we should just do this, right?
Yeah.
What is important as human beings is that we have to apply our own critical thinking. And that's when argument inquiry comes in as to think about, because those moral judgments and the value alignment has to happen to the human beliefs and human value system.
Exactly.
Right? Because
yeah,
at the end of the day, AI is merely a tool, right? And sort of think about it like a knife, right? You can use a knife to sort of do a surgery which can save a human life, or you can use the same knife to kill someone, right? So at some point, that value alignment has to happen. So AI as a tool has to be aligned to certain values that we believe as human beings is good for the human betterment. And to be able to do that, we have to step back and think about, okay, how do we develop a process and a system to think through this? And that's where critical thinking comes in. That's when inquiry comes in. That's when we have to argue it out in a dialectic sense, which is basically like propose something, there will be counter views as antithesis, and then of course we have to then come together as a synthesis of that. And then that's how we make progress, right? And that's a good way to also anchor our discussions around AI, because there is a pure technological aspect of how it is done. And then there is a more important aspect of why it should be done and what are the implications of doing it. And I think someone has to ask those questions as well.
Absolutely. And I think one very common example of common biases of the society being perpetuated through technologies is, for instance, if there was a company which was hiring, let's say, a huge number of male employees in the past, then if they are using and employing these technologies to assist them with the hiring processes, it will automatically perpetuate that sort of a bias, leaving behind our SDG goals, which include leave no one behind, right? So a huge chunk of our population then gets left behind. So this brings me to another question, which I think a lot of our audience will be curious to know, that why this combination? Why do you think it's a meaningful combination of us two talking together on this topic of AI Square?
Yeah, no, I think thanks for setting that up. I met you while I was at Harvard. So I think just for everyone's context, I'm a fellow here at Harvard working and researching on AI's impact, and particularly impact in the future of work, in the context of society, etc. And then there is this conference here called Harvard Conference for International Relations. Yeah. So Bhumika was one of the delegates who was chosen among, I don't know, thousands or tens of thousands of people who applied. So clearly she's very smart and really driven. And I was one of the speakers there at the conference. And that's when I met Bhumika, and she reached out to me. She had tremendous interest in the area of AI as well as policy implications of that. So we started talking, and clearly quite impressed by her background. I looked at her background. I think she's a gold medalist topper from Delhi University, a university where I also went for my undergrad. So there was instant connection as well. And I believe that she's doing some amazing work. So we thought that why don't we break down all the latest development in AI and how it is impacting the future of work, education, I would say even healthcare, including governance, etc., and bring it out, those ideas and concepts in a way that everyone can understand. And not only they understand the technicalities, which I think there's a lot of discussion about that, but also the implications and also the sort of normative side of things as to what should be done, how it should be done.
Absolutely.
The value and the judgment around that, so that we start building those contexts and awareness, because that is what makes us human, right? In a world where many things will get done by AI, we as humans also have to think about, like, how do we make sure that things are progressing in the way is aligned to our value system? So that's when we started talking, and Bhumika proposed this idea about let's do a podcast or a kind of a discussion so that we can bring out those thinking. And I think I'm glad to be on this podcast with her. So over to you, Bhumika. Yeah, please feel free to add.
I mean,
if I misquoted you, or if I mentioned something that did not happen when you were here at the conference. Yeah.
No, no, not at all. I think you very aptly set the context for all of the audience as to why the two of us discussing AI. I just add to it, like, to your basically an introduction. It's not just that you are at Howard right now. You've also led the Twitter India team for a long period of time. You've been at McKinsey, Intuit, Flipkart, and you're actually donning a lot of other hats, which I think is one of the USPs of this podcast, because you bring in the practitioner side of things while I bring in more theoretical and academic side of things. Only recently, I also secured rank 5 in the entire country in the UGC NET JRF
Congratulations.
examination.
That's a quite a big achievement. In a country like
Thank you.
India, where like millions of people appear for these national level exams. So clearly, I
Yes.
mean, you are being very modest in sort of telling about your.
No, no, no. Yeah, I mean, I have taken interest in working on the emerging ethics around these technologies with a special focus on artificial intelligence. I also wrote a paper on AI and the accountability conundrum in the past, where I tried to see the various stakeholders involved in the AI value chain and how do we assign responsibility and accountability to each of the stakeholders so that the negative use cases can actually be mitigated. But yes, apart from that, this time I went to Harvard and I was fortunate actually to come into touch with you. And thanks to you for being so accessible to youth like me. That's one of the hallmarks of, I will say, leaders who are on the other side of having experienced a huge number of things in the world. So, yes, I think this podcast is not just about you being on the practitioner side and me coming from an academic background, but also about two different poles that we come from in terms of different fields, right?
I love the way you brought out the complementarity of this discussion, right? With me as more of
Right.
a
Right.
nurse viewpoint, having run companies and having taken real world decisions around this, and you coming with a much more policy
Yeah.
and a very strong academic basis of things. So we can compare and contrast, and each of us can educate one another. And in that process, we can share that knowledge with everyone. And that's the whole idea of doing this video interview, so that everyone else can watch and also learn from that.
Absolutely. I think that does make sense. So, do you have any particular framework in mind using which we should align all of our discussions? I think one good framework is going by the India AI initiative, India AI mission. It has a particular number of pillars and it actually covers a huge chunk of different issues when we talk about artificial intelligence, starting from compute to skilling to various other parameters like funding for the startups.
Yeah, I think we can go with India AI mission. I think that would be a good one. But before that, we also want to talk about why we are even thinking about talking about AI so much. Let's have a bit of a discussion about that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think before we
Yes.
jump straight into India AI mission, one thing I want to also talk about is that the kind of change we are seeing is unprecedented, right? I've been in the technology space for many years. I've seen how mobile came and how everything changed. We also saw how social media changed many things in terms of information dissemination. But AI is a very fundamental change because clearly it is able to, it is much more general purpose. It pervades everything. It is affecting everything. Second is that the pace of
Absolutely.
change is mind blowing. I mean, every other day we are seeing a new announcement. And also, if you look at it, quarter is a long time in this space. And third is that it is directly impacting and affecting what humans or we as humans always thought only we could do. In fact, if you look at it, the common belief before AI came into the picture, Gen AI particularly, was that the more manual work, like robotic work, will be the first one to be automated. And then the content work or
Exactly.
the white collar work is something which requires creativity, it requires coordination, it requires deeper thinking, it requires many other aspects which are very innate to a human being. And those are the ones which will not get
Right.
affected. In fact, people said that always upskill yourself and get to a higher skill level. That was the mantra saying, okay, that's the way to prevent yourself from being automated away or from being like,
Yeah.
even there's a big deal about like offshoring, so from being getting offshored, right? Now, the irony right now is that the kind of roles which are being attacked or being addressed or are most prone to AI development is basically number one is coding. So AI can do a much better job in doing like most kind of programming and coding. In fact, there are so many good tools out there where you can code by just talking to an interface in English.
Chatbot.
Term for
Yes.
that called vibe
Yeah.
coding, which is basically
Okay.
you tell what you want to be built, whether it's a website or an app or any kind of a programming software, and it will start building it.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, someone mentioned, I don't know who mentioned it. That person said that English is going to be the most popular programming language from now on, because the only language you need to learn is
Absolutely. Oh,
the
yeah.
natural language. You don't need a
Right.
programming language, because
Python and
AI will convert
agree.
that into a code, and you will have the piece of code or a software working.
Mm,
So that's a
mm,
dilemma right now, right? Because that's the one role was the coding, and in fact, AI is coming after the very engineering team in most companies that were at the forefront of proposing AI to be used. Like if you look at most of the big tech companies, they are really downsizing and also becoming a flatter organization. And interestingly, they are replacing many of the engineering role with AI. That's one. And the second one was creative content, or sort of the both textual and visual content. We always thought that creative writing is an art, and only human beings can express themselves with emotions, and they can capture a situation, and they can relate a story.
mm,
And also similarly, we felt that drawing a picture or like imagining a movie or a video, that requires a lot of creative thinking, a lot of understanding about the context environment. But at least on the content side, I am seeing such great content coming out, that because the system has been fed in all the creative writing samples that exist,
yeah. Across the
able to
internet.
pick up
Yes.
the right things from right places.
Yes.
And with visuals as well, of course, the visuals and the videos are not as great as I would say a human being can do right now. But I kind of feel like the rate at which things are improving, it's only going to be a matter of a few months, or maybe at most a few quarters, where we see that even the content of visuals and videos will start surpassing what most human beings are able to do with all the skill sets they have. And that's very scary,
Right.
because it has serious implications on many things, right? Before we even get into the good and the bad of it, think about it this way, right? The whole understanding of a role-based job structure, that will start dissolving, because ultimately you are trying to get to a goal or an outcome. And if you can organize yourself differently with AI in the loop, the whole concept about this is my job and this is how it should be done, everything will start dissolving. So the question
True.
is, it's not about like AI automating you, AI sort of rethinking the entire job or entire goal-oriented
Scenario.
behavior, right? I mean, like your goals can
Yeah.
completely be different, and there can be a different combination to achieve it.
Mm,
And
mm.
even the current organizational setup may be too redundant or too inapplicable to that, right? Some people are talking that even a one-person unicorns are gonna be very possible, because what you need is one vision and one idea, and
Also,
everything else
yes, one
can be
AI
done by
assistant.
AI, right?
Yes. Yes.
So what AI is doing is that it is cutting down the cost of execution to almost zero for most places, right? So that has
Mm,
serious
mm.
implications in the way capital is allocated, in the way things are organized. And that has implications on, okay, the future of work, what is going to be my job, or what is going to be my career, what skill set would be valued in the world, how we are going to be set up as a, and it also has public policy implications, right? What do you teach? What should be the education
Yes.
policy? What do you tax? How do you organize your cities? How do you organize your workforce? Would people work in cities, going to an office? Would there be single person companies? So
Mm.
everything up in play, right? I mean, and I think
Yes.
these are going to be
Mm.
some concrete points that have to be discussed, probably starting now, and I think for the next few years, I would say. And that
Right.
is obligation.
I think this brings me to one very important perspective from the youth side of things. We see that in a lot of countries, the market is becoming inward looking, right? So it's already like a lot of job crunches for the youth across the world. So I think in this scenario, it's even more important to discuss the right sort of upskilling that we have to do so that those jobs are not taken away by. And also, I think it's shaping the way in which globalization in itself used to function. Like, even if we look at it from the geopolitical lens, a lot of countries will then be fighting for compute, will then be fighting for the various critical minerals that are actually going into the design of chips, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
countries becoming inward looking is exactly opposite of what happened in the 1991 era when people started to come together. There was robust movement of people, knowledge, goods across the borders, right? So from a more borderless world, I think AI has, in fact, AI has been a result of this borderless world, right? Talent moving from one country to the other, all the knowledge being available on the internet. But what has AI actually resulted in? it's a more fragmented world, right? In terms of nations being very hyperactive,
But
looking
you bring out a
inwards.
very interesting point, and I think this fragmentation and like inward lookingness is happening because of AI, or it is happening because AI has come at a time where
Mhm.
countries had started on a path to become more isolationist. In the sense that if you think about it, pre-COVID,
Yeah.
countries were far more liberal, open, people encouraged trade, right? And leadership
Hmm.
more talking about we are one world and we are interdependent, right? I think
Hmm.
my personal view is COVID really got people to think about themselves first, because when your life is at stake, every country
Hmm.
was scrambling to get their own vaccine. They were scrambling to get their own health force organized, and they were scrambling to
Hmm.
ensure that their people survive the pandemic. And I think that, and also the fiscal situation in most countries really worsened. And
Hmm.
and then we saw tremendous dissatisfaction among population across different countries, which led to the rise of powerful
Hyper-national.
right-oriented leaders in most countries, whether it is US,
Right.
whether it is India, whether it is any other country in the world. So
Mhm.
the leadership in those countries got an excuse saying, okay, we need to have strong leadership, we need to be inward looking, we need to get our resources organized, and we need to solve for our people first. And with that backdrop, AI came in, and suddenly people realized
Right.
this is far more powerful. This is something really, it's like, this is a great tool, both from the perspective of offense as well as defense. So we need to
Right.
make sure that we win this race. And clearly,
Mhm.
US was very far ahead in the game, but China has quickly picked up.
Of
And
course,
we saw
DeepSeek.
with DeepSeek, and I think we saw many things that
Mhm.
happened in China as well. And then
Mhm.
fast forward to now with the tariffs and everything, we are seeing the
Yes.
second phase of this where people are not just having the rhetoric and a positive way of, okay, let's be competitive and let's try to get to the next one. They're also blocking the other country, right? With the tariffs coming
Hmm.
in, and I think with China putting a blockage on the export of rare earth, which is used for many of these things, and US
Yes.
are also now putting some restrictions on what can be exported. Countries are locked in this arms race. And I think that's a great segue for the India AI mission now, because the question we have to think of, okay, in this global kind of a backdrop with sort of US and China locked in this AI arms race and also a trade
Mhm.
war.
Yes.
So what should India do? And I think in my mind, India is in a unique position, right? Because clearly it is not in this fight between US and China. It is a country which is large enough to be important, but it is also a country which is not, you know, trying to dominate someone else and try to go for global superiority. So people don't feel insecure about it at this point in time.
Right.
And in
Right.
that context, and technologically, I think this is something we in India have always been very good, right? I mean, if you think about technology, we have not been the innovators, I would say, but we have been like fast followers, and we have been the one that have been able to use technology in a way that we have been able to uplift our people. We have been able to build great business out of it. And we have been able to get employment, and we have been able to get our people ahead of the game in those areas very quickly, right?
Exactly. Also,
Um,
like
yeah.
talking
So
about, yeah, I mean, talking about India's tech innovation, I think the digital public infrastructure that we came up with is a very good example that we have set for the world. And something of that sort, if that can also be replicated with artificial intelligence, that will be another revolution that India can actually bring to the world.
absolutely. India has been quite successful in two things that the whole world talks about it. In fact, I was talking to the chairman and CEO of General Atlantic the other day, and they made an
Yeah.
investment in PhonePe. And even he was aware, and he was fully sold on how superior the whole
Hmm.
payment infrastructure in India is with UPI and also the identity structure, Aadhaar. And those are the solid examples of, if we put our heart and soul behind something, we can really do a very good
Yes.
job. And that too at a
Right.
scale of a billion people, right? And if you think about it,
Yes.
India has a demographic advantage of 1.4 billion people, which provides like a context for massive adoption and data, right?
Mm.
And then at the same time, we have unique situation with huge diversity. And we also have unique needs, right? For example, we need AI for agriculture. We need it for understanding local languages and preserving those local languages and perpetuating
Yes.
many things about our culture. There's a huge need for it, for it, for AI in public health. And of course, such a large country requires a lot of digital governance as well. And India just simply can't rely on imported models, right? It has to be
Mm.
homegrown AI that understands India's problem, right? And and I would like to quote something here, right? I mean, AI trained on Western data can't solve Indian problems. India needs AI
Exactly.
that can speak a
Yes.
local language, be it Punjabi or Bhojpuri, not just English, because English is spoken by the top 100, 200, 300 million people. We are a country of 1.4 billion people. And I think if
Billion people.
you think about, technology benefiting everyone, AI has to be trained on Indian nuances, Indian languages, Indian context, and it has to then solve for it. And I think in that context, I think you asked me about India's AI mission. So let's get some fundamentals right and some set the context. So first is why India needs its own AI strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with the global context. So we are clearly seeing AI arms race and dominated by US and China, and they are locked into
Yes.
this race to be the best
Superior.
when it comes to AI
Yeah.
innovation.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, on the other hand, we have India, which is somewhere in between these two large players, and it has its own demographic advantage. So large data sets, because 1.4 billion people, there's a huge need for innovation, particularly driven by AI, to solve the kind of issues that we have around local languages, public health, local governance, and also to push ourselves to the next level of evolution when it
Mm.
comes to agriculture, when it comes to education, health, etc. So there
Right.
is a huge need as well, and we have advantage as
Mm.
well. And
Mm.
we are neither in US nor China. So the question then becomes, okay, what do we do? And I think in that context, it does make sense for a country like India to also think about it from its own perspective as to what it should do. And that is where I think having its own AI strategy makes sense. And
Right.
I mean, I'll tell you a very real example, right? India has many languages, right? I mean, so most AI models are trained on Western data, English language, first world problems. But we need
Mm-hmm.
something that understands India viscerally and is able to communicate with people in their own native language, be it Marathi in Maharashtra or say Bhojpuri, right? I mean, why it has to be
Yes.
English all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
English is only spoken by the top 100, 200, 300 million people, but you need something that really works for everyone. And that if we only when we achieve that, we can really democratize access to technology and really lead to upliftment of a lot of people.
Right. Absolutely.
Moving to what is the India AI mission, right? So I'll just talk about some few facts, and then we'll talk about what it's trying to achieve and maybe some challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So India AI mission was announced in I think sometime in March of 24, and it has a budget of about
Yes.
10,000 crores, which roughly translates to
Mm-hmm.
over $1 billion. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a government-run initiative led by Ministry of Electronics and IT, and
Mm.
it's coordinated via the India AI Digital Public Infrastructure Initiative. And it's important to look at the goals, right? I mean, because clearly what it is trying to achieve is very important for everyone to know. So one is, of course,
Absolutely.
democratize access to AI, very relevant in the context of India. Large
Mm-hmm.
population, everyone doesn't have access to everything. So clearly, if you are implementing AI, we don't want people who already have a lot of resources to become even more capable,
Richer.
which is important,
Yes.
but also to uplift everyone who doesn't have access to all these tools.
Mm-hmm.
And the other objective is to support homegrown innovations, right? How do we make sure that innovations that are happening in the country are getting the right support? And as a country, it also aims to develop our own sovereign AI capabilities, particularly
Right.
in the global
Very
context
important.
where each country is becoming sort of inward looking and isolationist, right?
Yes.
And the most important goal, which in my mind also, which is also part of the goal of this mission, is to make AI safe, ethical, and inclusive. Again, very
Mm-hmm.
relevant in India, given the diversity we have and kind of challenges we have are very unique. So keeping that as
Right.
a goal is very important.
Mm.
Coming to the building blocks, you asked about the 7 building blocks. So I think I'll sort of list them down and talk about it a bit in slightly
Yes.
more detail. So the first one is
Mm-hmm.
the India AI compute, which is basically, how do we get the right compute infrastructure? And
Mm.
all these AI models consume a lot of compute or like processing power, right? And you need like
Yes.
very powerful NVIDIA GPUs right now. And so
Mm.
it talks about 10,000 GPUs and making it available to startup researchers and government labs. The
Yes.
second part is about the future skills, right? Clearly, AI is impacting and will impact even more what we get educated on, what our youths get educated on. So it talks about
Mm.
those as well. So how do we incorporate AI curriculum in schools and colleges? Then it talks about funding and financing of startups. How do we ensure
I
that?
think you're a great person to talk about them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like clearly, Indian ecosystem is evolving,
Mm,
but still there's a lot of things to be done. So my view is that, I mean, this is go a wrong way in ensuring
mm,
that new kind of entrepreneurs take the leap and try something of their own, which can then push the country
mm.
to the next trajectory. I mean, if you look at it,
Right.
most of the innovations happening in AI in other countries are through entrepreneurial ecosystem, right? But be it say in the US Bay Area with OpenAI and Perplexity, etc. And also in China as well, the DeepSeek came out of a private enterprise. It didn't come out from a government
Yes.
run lab, right? So
Mm,
the government's role is to create a enabling and empowering ecosystem and ensure that the funding flows in the right way to the people who require it, so that innovation can
yes.
happen, right?
Right.
The fourth pillar around innovation, there's also innovation pillar in India AI mission, which
Mm,
talks about
mm-hmm.
Indian LLMs in local languages. Clearly, the LLMs that we are using have been trained on like the global, the overall internet data, which is hugely
Mm,
dominated by English. And
mm.
so clearly, there is a scope to think about, okay, how do we improve the capability of a local language LLM for
Right.
Indian languages?
Mm.
And also LLM, which is trained on Indian data sets, right? For example, if you think about voice data, right? So there are unique ways in which Indians speak,
Pronounce. Yeah.
pronounce
Dialects.
things, not just in English, but also in their own language, like Hindi or
Yes.
Tamil or Telugu. So
Yes.
someone has to ensure that the AI is trained on different Indian voices, different nuances, different dialects, and is able to, give information back or communicate with people in India in a way that seems very native and natural, right?
Right.
It can't be like a
Right.
standardized version of something which is applicable everywhere in India, because if we do that, we will lose the local nuances and the local culture and local traditions, right? So
True.
that's
I think I'm reminded of a very
yeah,
good saying here, which is
yeah,
summarizing Indian diversity. It goes like this: कोस कोस पे पानी बदले, चार
yeah,
कोस पे वाणी. So
yeah,
it shows us as to how diverse the country is and how important it is for uh, our own foundational models to get built, right? To incorporate the sort of diversity that we have, and in fact, to present it as a repository for the entire world. Yes. So
yeah.
please go ahead. Yeah.
I think you make a very good point. In fact, if I reflect on the evolution of internet, right? I mean, when World Wide Web came and like people started building websites, it was so
Mm-hmm.
dominated by English that for several years, the only content was available in English. And I think only recently we started seeing that Hindi websites and other language websites have
Yeah.
come up. But even then, they are pretty not at the same level and quality as the English ones, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
forced everyone to learn English. We don't want
Right.
that digital divide to happen with AI. So we
Yes.
don't want AI to be serving only English speaking audience,
Mm-hmm.
because actually people who don't speak English actually need it even more, right?
Yes.
So it's an important thing to keep in mind that we need to make the intervention now versus
Mm.
reacting to it like 5 years later or 3 years later, as we did
Absolutely.
as we did in the time of internet, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So that's one.
Yeah.
The fifth pillar is the dataset platform, India AI dataset platform. So open, anonymized, high quality dataset for developers, making it available, and
Mm-hmm.
includes very India unique data around languages, agriculture, health, climate data, etc.
Mm-hmm.
This is very important because I think being home to 1.4 billion people, we do have amazing data sets, and
Yes.
increasingly more and more data sets are getting digitalized.
Mm.
So that can be used as long as, and we have to ensure some kind of a safety check there. It has to be anonymized and ensured, privacy has
Yes.
to be ensured there. The sixth
Yes.
pillar is around applications. So India AI applications, which is, how do we think about building applications that solve Indian problems? For example, advisory for farmers,
Mm.
public health, law enforcement, disaster
Mm.
alerts, right? I mean, those are pretty
Mm.
important, socially relevant applications that have to be built.
Right.
And
Right.
similarly, we also have to think about how AI and its application could impact education and governance, two very important area. We have a large youth
Mm.
population. Education
Mm.
is important and will remain very core to many of the public policy, government, and also private sector initiatives. And ultimately,
Right.
because we are a functioning democracy, governance is important as well, how the
Mm-hmm.
government sector works, and we are dependent on government for many things. And the governance of that is something that can be improved as well through AI. And the
Yes.
seventh and the final pillar is around safe and trusted AI.
Trusted.
Is
Mm.
how do we ensure safe, ethical, inclusive, and we are already seeing some problems with AI as well, right? For example, deepfake is a big problem, particularly how it can be misused
Mm.
to create false narrative, impact election outcomes, affect civic integrity.
Yes.
So deepfake is one problem. The other problem is around, how people can misuse someone else's data,
Mm.
use that to, impersonate someone. So all that stuff is going
Mm.
to be important, particularly
Mm.
as we move towards a digital ecosystem
Right.
powered by AI. So those are the 7 pillars.
Mm.
But also there are quite a few challenges that have to be taken into account and also have to be
Mm-hmm.
addressed, right? I mean, it's not going to be easy. One is, of course, the
Yes.
hardware bottlenecks, right? So India
Mm.
doesn't is dependent on chip from other countries.
Mm.
So that
Mm.
is a bottleneck right now, and I think in my mind
Mm.
that would be something that has to be looked into. The
Mm.
other part is also AI talent, right? We talk about a lot of demographic dividend that we have and huge youth population, but all of them
Mm.
are not AI relevant talent. And
Mm.
even the engineers have to be repurposed to do this.
Yes. Mm.
And we would also need a lot of investment in the right kind of education and
Mm.
also and a funding and a mechanism to support deeper R&D around this. So it requires a
Yes.
much different kind of talent and a much
Mm.
different kind of work than what it is. I'm not saying we
Mm.
cannot do it, but we have to consciously think about it and be intentional about it to be able to achieve it. It is achievable,
Mm.
but it is not like
Yes.
something which is going to happen automatically, right?
Right.
The third challenge is going to be around data privacy.
Mm.
So we need to think about, okay, when we think about Indian data sets and sort of training the LLM model, how we can do that while ensuring proper protection and privacy and sort of anonymization, etc. And
Yes.
also the fourth one is slightly more nuanced view, right? Are we gonna move towards a few large centralized companies and players, or are we
Mm-hmm.
gonna create an ecosystem of small startups
Mm.
in a very democratized and a decentralized manner? In which case, where is the
Mm.
efficiency of scale and sort of how do we do this? And there's going to be a good
Right.
discussion and debate. I mean, we do need a few players who can take the lead and be the world-class innovators, but we
Mm-hmm.
also want to create a mechanism where we need thousands and thousands of other smaller startups to also thrive. And we have to create a playing field where they can also have their own game, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that's an interesting one that I think as a country we have to deal with. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I would like to end by saying, we are at a very unique juncture in
Right.
human history. I've never seen a change like this and innovation like this as I have seen in the last 2 years. I mean, in the last 2 years, and I'm here at Harvard, I get to meet like world leaders, I get to participate in discussions on many
Mm-hmm.
cutting edge topics. And every other day, I see a new announcement about AI, whether it is from one of the leading players from the Bay Area or from China, or small innovations coming from very interesting small startups, or people like 2 engineers who just graduated from MIT or who are graduating just or still a PhD students coming up
Mm.
and demoing something that is mind blowing.
Right.
They have like the innovations I'm seeing in agentic AI and how you can delegate the work and work can
Mm.
be done. It's not just about giving you, text or an essay or a picture. It's actually doing your real work, and I think I can see that for real.
Yes. Mm.
From your airline booking to getting your medical insurance claim, I'm seeing very interesting use cases, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, in the context of India, what it means is that India has to seize this opportunity. India has the option
Yes.
to become the AI for the global South leader. It can become a leader in that area because with US and
Right.
China locked in the race, India has a place to play as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it can train AI models on diverse population and use cases and be an exporter of that AI trained model. And
Right.
the more interesting debate, which I think we'll have to wait and see, is that does AI widen the inequality we see in the country or it closes it? And
Right.
I am hoping, at least my bet is that it is the latter, which is it closes the inequality bet. What else?
Yes. You've already raised quite a lot of points for us to like debate and discuss, and which aligns with the title of this podcast. It's like arguments and inquiry for artificial intelligence into artificial intelligence. And I think just to summarize it again, we are here to set the voice of India in this entire debate about artificial intelligence, while also bringing in the global expertise so that India learns from the global experts and the global examples and vice versa. So I think let's have this podcast go what our External Affairs Minister says the India way. This is AI for AI square, and we are planning to go the India way for the world. So like Team India for the world. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think good. I think that's a great way to close it. And Bhumika,
Yeah.
really enjoyed talking to you. And I think I'm excited about future episodes as well. I mean, we'll bring up, this was a more like a beginning and a framing kind of a discussion, but we can go deeper into how AI can impact education in greater
Yes.
detail, how it can impact public health, what it will do
Yes.
to the future of work, what it
Right.
means for your career, what it means for, many things that impact everyday life. I mean, all the way from e-commerce to like your, I would say, what we do at our jobs. So we can talk about that. We can also bring some global leaders who have been experts in this and get their opinion. Plus,
Right.
the bigger objective I also see is that it will make us very conscious and aware rather than
Mm-hmm.
taking things at face value and how it is being handed down to us. It will
Yes.
get us to ask the right questions because in a world where AI can give the answers, all the answers, the real skill set we have is like, are we asking the right questions? Are we focused on the right
Absolutely.
topics? And are we able to
Yes.
discern the good from the bad
Yes.
and build that, I would say, understanding about where AI can amplify us and therefore has to be used, and where
Mm-hmm.
AI can amplify the bad things and make it worse, right? I mean, that's the initial thing which we started by saying, AI perpetuates what we are and what we do. I mean, if you're doing something good, it
Yes.
can make it better. If you're doing something
Yes.
bad, we have the tools. We can do
Right.
even worse things with those tools, right? So I
And
think,
actually, that brings another point to my mind. AI
yeah,
is like the empirical, which is what is, but what
yeah,
we are also focusing upon is the normative, which is what ought to be.
yeah,
And it's difficult for technologies to tell us what ought to be simply based on the past trends, right? So
yeah,
let's base this conversation around both the empirical as well as the normative, and
yeah,
try to find a better normative and build like what the ancient Greece society used to call eudaimonia, which is
yeah,
like the happy society. Yeah.
yes. Cool.
Yes.
Great.
Nice talking to you. Lovely talking to you.
You as well, Bhumika. Yeah. Have a great day ahead. I know it's evening for you, and I think it's my morning. So I think
Yes.
so great. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.